a Million by Boson here on the Brightside. Who else is 1 in a million? Yeo Sha-En, our
Yes.
happiness scientist.
She is.
That's right. Totally scoring points here.
Nice one.
I'm very smooth. Yeah.
You just love to please people, don't you? Just love to please.
Oh, look at the segue.
Sorry. Like that, like
nice
that.
segue.
Yeah.
Wow.
Into our topic for today. But yes, a huge welcome back to Sha-En joining us here in the studio to talk about that. People pleasing.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Surprise.
I would kick you underneath the
If you could reach.
console if I could reach you. But my
Sha-En,
legs-
before it gets violent,
Yeah.
what is people pleasing?
Well, pleasing is like pleasing others in order to be liked.
Okay.
And people who are people pleasers generally are very helpful, kind, and nice. You know, the ones who are always like, I do lah. They seem to be everywhere and helping everyone. And you wonder whether they get any sleep.
Ooh.
Why are you looking at me? Don't look at well, I haven't got much sleep. Yes, you're right.
Because it seems to come at their own expense of like getting rest
Yes,
and their own
yes.
needs, right?
Correct.
Sometimes.
And the goal is that they want to maintain harmony, or they want to be liked, or they want to be approved. Right? I mean, the need to belong, the need to be part of it, or the need to like be seen in a positive light. And so they tend to please.
Does it have anything to do with like maybe avoiding conflict? You
Yes,
know, so they just
definitely.
kind of give in or whatever.
Like, for example, if you grew up in a very messy environment,
Sure.
right, and you wanted harmony actually, so you
Yeah.
try and fit in to become good and not cause any trouble. Yeah, so that's also one of the signs.
And in a work setting?
And in a work setting, yes, like for example, you know, you could say no, but actually you say yes most of the time because you don't want to like, that one is the one always disagreeing. If I disagree with that person, then end up we're going to have mess in the office. So you
Okay.
just agree, no?
So you know, I guess, what are some of the examples of people becoming people pleasers? How do they become a people pleaser?
Yeah, so I guess, as you know, a lot of these kind of behaviors start when in early childhood and growing up. Like, for example, I had a client whose parent told them, you know, well, why are you crying? And then he said, I'm upset about something. I was like, okay, but that's not even something to be upset about. So if you want to continue crying, I'll give you something to cry about.
Ooh.
Wow.
So like really harsh, very mean. And so
Whoa.
as a child, you know, what's the response? It's like, okay, I'll stop crying and I'll just be that perfectly smiley kid who doesn't cause any trouble, you know, and in order to survive being still accepted by the parent, that child had to adapt.
But then you
Yeah.
suppress a lot, don't you? by
Yes,
doing
exactly. And so that's why people pleasing often results in people feeling resentful, angry. I mean, sometimes they don't even know they're pleasers.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess that's the point of doing it today, is to help people to recognize that, hey, actually what I thought is who I am might actually just be this people-pleasing
Right.
persona that I've developed.
Or like if they're very helpful and all that, it might actually be more of people pleasing and potentially detrimental to yourself,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
We're going to carry on this conversation on our Facebook Live. Come and join us, facebook.com/1FM913. We're going to ask, is people pleasing a good or bad thing? So come and join us and Yeo Sha-En as well.
91.3 1FM.
Bro, are you ready for the Lunar New Year?
I'm ready to go to
Hey, good morning, guys. How's it going on this Monday? A great topic, people pleasing. I guess it's something, you know, when you talked about the symptoms of it, you know, putting others before themselves because they want to avoid conflict. They keep a lot of things in. Is people pleasing a good or bad thing?
I mean, I guess as a child, you people please because you wanted to be loved, right? And there's always this conflict between authenticity and attachment. And when you're young, attachment's important because if you have no adult figure in your life, you could literally like have no support at all, and that's a frightening thing. So for a sense of safety, the child probably will choose attachment, right? And therefore they'll please because like if I'm good, then they'll love me. They'll give me all the things that I need.
So it's like acceptance and validation.
Yes, but then as you get older, you realize that, hey, actually that's not really me, and that's where the tussle begins between authenticity versus attachment. You want to be you, you want to say no to certain things, but you've gotten used to a certain
it's
pattern
ingrained
of
in you,
behavior.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is the line? At
Yeah.
which point are you crossing the line? You know, at which part, you know, when you acquiesce, is it like, okay, you're doing your job or you're being a nice person or a pleasant person, and then and at which part does it cross the line? It's like, no, that's too much.
Yeah, I think it's something we have to check in with ourselves. Like, sometimes when you say yes, and immediately you're like, ew, why did I say yes?
that? Yeah.
And that's a guttural response. And I think we need to listen to that. Because when we listen more, then we realize, actually, I didn't want to do that. And sometimes you say yes, and then you go for this meeting. Like, I had a friend recently who said, I got out of that meeting feeling like it was a very soggy meeting. It was like
a little bit damp.
Yeah, then I said, but who is that person?
The people or the meeting?
And everything, the whole experience. Then I asked her, like, why do you go? And she was like, I don't know. It's a friend I've known for a while. And so you just went along, right? But actually underneath all that could have been like, it's an old friend, I don't want to let them down, I don't want to disappoint. This friend seems to like me, so maybe I should like them back, give them another chance. But we start creating these excuses. And then even though we probably had that experience before, we repeat it. And then we go back through that loop and
that pattern continues.
Yeah. So we need to, how to draw that line is really to check in with yourself. Like, how did I feel after going through something like that? Is this something I should have said no to? Another example of people pleasing is also taking on responsibility that isn't meant to be yours. Or like saying sorry when something went wrong, when actually it's not your fault at all.
Okay.
But you felt responsible.
And what you've also pointed out are signs that we can look out for if we think that we are being too much of a people pleaser. We've got some of our folks joining us on our Facebook Live, and we just want to say good morning to Jagat. And Jagat says that Sha-En is on point. There's so much to learn from her. Do you feel that people pleasing is also cultural?
I guess in some ways, we have always had this like, kids shouldn't be hurt, or you listen to me kind of approach, right? Yep. And if we have that approach continuing, then of course, as kids, the need to feel like you are going to make your parent happy is very strong, right? Even in my own household, like, I'm not that kind of very dominant parent, but I do occasionally talk to my children and I say, did you do that just to make mommy happy? And they'll be like, yeah. They say, but I want to make mommy happy. But I can understand that. We all want to, but it's okay if they do it occasionally. But I think it's good to watch out for signs if they're doing it all the time, especially if they're doing it for friends repeatedly. And actually, it's not a good thing for them to do.
I am happy to say my kids are very authentic.
I was just going to say, mine kind of swing the other way, and don't really do the pleasing bit very well.
That's pleasing. What's that?
Yeah. Willie has a very good one. He says, I would agree with people pleasing than people pleasing, because people pleasing can be seen as carrying favor in order to, for personal gain. To me, people pleasing is more of being like a mediator for messy situations.
Okay. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Very nice one, Willie. Alrighty, come and join us. We're going to head back to our live on air on the Brightside to talk more about people pleasing, and we're even going to dive into how can it impact kids, and how should we kind of like stop them from being too much of a people pleaser, because from what I'm gathering from you, it really starts from young.
Yeah, a lot of these behaviors, obviously, if let's say it wasn't a pattern, and then they got into the workplace or got into school, and they had an adult figure or maybe a supervisor who exhibited certain patterns of behavior, and they felt the need that they needed to so-called curry favor, then that pattern could emerge, obviously.
Right. So come and join us as we discuss all this and more on our on air at 1FM 91.3.
One FM 91.3, good times, greatest hits. Climby Fisher, love changes everything, and sometimes people pleasing can also change things. That's our topic for today with our happiness scientist Yeo Sha-En. Talking about people pleasing. At what point is it a good or a bad thing, and how can you tell if it's detrimental for yourself?
Yeah, you'll probably walk away feeling resentful, angry, exhausted because your needs are not being met.
I see.
Right. So if let's say you're taking the blame for almost everything. Right, maybe at the workplace.
Shouldering the blame.
Yeah, shouldering. And it's not even 100% yours. Then you're going to feel weighed down because but your instinct is, I'll say sorry. or I'll over apologize. That's also one of the signs. And why do we do this? Why do we take the blame? Because maybe, we were blamed for something that wasn't ours for, over time.
Sure.
And then we realize, maybe it's always me. And so you can imagine that over time also these people could become very insecure, low self-esteem, because they believe that it must be my fault.
Oh no.
On that note, while you're also kind of blaming yourself, people will also try to take advantage of that, surely. So how difficult is it to kind of maintain a sense of self-worth in this whole people-pleasing saga?
I say that because I'm a recovering people-pleaser.
Oh.
And it's true, right? I mean, I grew up in a household that I'm a pretty strong, dominant mother and a very easygoing dad.
Okay.
And so I always wanted my mom to be happy, because when she wasn't, then there'll be a lot of flare-ups at home. And so I grew up thinking, okay, I just need to get in line. Don't rock the boat. Don't make everything,
I'm gonna high five you here. Same like my mom also.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother also. She was the tigress on the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we call her.
Not a crouching tiger, but a
Sorry?
very much a full-on tiger.
You see her, you hear her.
All right.
Yeah. And so to avoid the hot temper, I mean, all of me and my sister would just okay, we're not going to do anything. We can feel it rising here also. We want to say something. And we're like,
so that was more of a hidden dragon.
Yeah. That's why it's coming out now.
Understood. Got it.
Your favorite movie, yeah, Shehzad?
On that note, Sha-En, you're a recovered people pleaser. How did you get out of that funk? What did you do to?
Yeah, I think I recognized that, I was always angry. There's this, every one of us has a certain way of responding to situations, and sometimes we respond with sadness.
Yeah. Sure.
Sometimes we feel guilty. For some people, guilt is very predominant.
Wow.
For me, it was anger. And I've always asked myself, where is this anger coming from? And I guess, I go to therapy and all that, and then that's when I realized that I'm angry because I don't say what I really feel sometimes, and I don't express my needs sometimes, and actually quite frequently. And in fact, the practice that I have even up to this point is asking myself, is that really what I want to do? Or is that the nice part of me that's saying yes because it will somehow bring everything together? Chinese New Year is coming up, right? And then somebody in your family says, hey, can you do this? Then you're inside, not really. But then it's but I've always done it. And so I have to pause and ask myself, is it something I really want to do? Most often the answer is no, because I just want to stay at home with my kids, for example, right?
Sha, we had this kind of a similar conversation before Christmas.
Yes.
And I remember you saying
the festivities.
Yeah,
and
I got the
that.
impression you were saying when you had to do Christmassy things, and you were like, yeah, I've done that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could sense was a little bit of the hidden dragon was kind of coming out there. So I get what you mean. I see what you mean.
But that's all good and well. I mean, in a personal setting, I mean, you're angry. I can go to therapy. But in a work setting, how do you say no, to management and your bosses?
Yeah, and I would say it may not be immediately. If you say no straight away, obviously people are going to say this person's so inflexible, right? But I think it's starting to practice saying no in lower stakes situations. So although we say at the workplace is one place, personal is one place, but we could practice saying no at stakes that are low. For example, a friend asks you out for makan. Say no. Practice there first, because the more you practice it like a muscle, then it becomes a bit easier to say it at the workplace.
Yeah, because I think...
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, and if, let's say, at the workplace you find I'm saying no too often, then you might calibrate. Am I saying no now for the sake just because of saying no?
Correct.
It can be calibrating, right? It doesn't have to be a flat black and white situation, and we have to see the context.
But I think I'm gathering that it really is a process, and you do have to sort of retrain yourself, right?
Yes.
It's kind
Unlearn,
of tough,
right?
Yeah, quite a
Unlearn
tough
and
one to
relearn.
get over.
The thing I struggle with is if a guy says no, he's being firm, he's decisive. But when a lady says no, she's being difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, we have to recognize as well that perceptions are not something that we can change. And I think the more we give into those perceptions, then the more we're going to feel that resentment at the pit of our stomach. So, and sometimes what we do is we say no and then we over-explain.
Yeah.
Right.
No, because this, sometimes it's just about our I wouldn't say that it's always about our confidence, but if we say it and we mean it, I think people will understand it a bit better or accept it a bit more.
Yeah, that's
that
a
it's
really
part
great
of
point.
you.
Yeah,
right?
that's a really great point.
Yeah.
And then you get to stay authentic to yourself.
Yes.
We're going to head back onto our Facebook Live. Come and join us. We're going to ask about how parents can actually prevent their kids from becoming people pleasers. This one I'm all ears for. Come and join us.
There's nothing like the right music in the right place.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Back on Facebook Live to have this discussion with Yeo Sha-En. And the question right now is a big one because I do, I recognize that I have done people pleasing. Maybe I still do. And I want to stop my kids from going down that track. You know what I mean? It's okay to be cooperative, but not to the point that it kind of detriments their well-being, right? So how can parents actually prevent their kids from becoming people pleasers?
There's always this balance between being right. Parents will say, listen to me because I say so. And that's you wanting to be right.
And assert yourself, right?
Yes, and assert yourself, assert your authority so that they don't climb all over your head, for example.
I see.
But kids are also growing and developing their own independence and own opinions, and we want them to be able to express that. So as a parent, we can give that space to allow them to express themselves. Because if they don't get this experience, and then later on, as to Carol's point, if we want them to assert themselves at the workplace, they're going to find it hard.
Yeah.
Because they have no practice.
Right.
Right? And you say, I must always keep quiet, so keep quiet lah. And then when I get to the workplace, I'm not feeling good, I keep quiet lah. And sometimes, so that's what I mean by if you have a lot of practice, you build up the capacity, and you build a capacity to be confident to express yourself, and people will see it in not just your words, but your body language as well.
We have a comment here from Adrian who says, I'm guessing a lot of people out there went through this kind of yin and yang atmosphere at home and have their own coping mechanism, and probably people pleasing is one of those coping mechanisms.
Yes, definitely, yeah. And when we say coping, it's because you needed to survive through those times. And so we learned to become like that. But that learned personality may not be 100% authentic. So now as we get older, as we become adults, that's when we ask ourselves, is that really truly me? And it almost feels like, wow, this is such a laborious process.
Okay.
But learning is learning, right? So as we unlearn it, then we have to relearn. Yeah.
I think someone brought up a good point. Is it a cultural thing? Because, we don't want to offend. As Asians, you're also respectful to your parents. You don't talk back. Yeah, so is it part and parcel of culture? And then as a result, it ties into your identity. Yeah, is this really me? Am I, the Asian me, this is respectful. Being quiet is respectful.
Correct. And I think it's a fine line, and respect looks different in different households. And although you may have grown up in that particular household, in that particular culture, it doesn't mean that you agree with it. It's just become the norm for you. And to me, it's perfectly normal to challenge, and I always encourage my children, it's okay to challenge what is the norm if it doesn't feel good and comfortable for you.
Agreed.
But the way you challenge it does not have to be shouting, being harsh, personality pointed. You can say, hey, what was that all about? I don't really understand, why do we need to do this?
Sure.
And it comes from a point of curiosity as opposed to telling or directing or pushing. Yeah.
A really great chime-ins from Jagat this morning, and he wants to add on to this whole discussion about how parents can help kids. He's asking about what about school and social influences? If kids are influenced by that, then would they become more pleasing in their nature?
Well, it depends on what influence you're talking about. So, for example, in schools, there's a variety of teachers, right? Some are very permissive, meaning you can do whatever you want. Some are very controlling. And of course, if they've been exposed to a very controlling environment with a teacher, it could also mean that they lose their voice. They become very passive. They withdraw because to them it's like, what's the point? Sometimes it just flips the other side. They become very cynical. What's the point of saying anything?
I'm not going to get anywhere.
Anyway, no point. Teacher's word is always the word, right? So why say something? Yeah, so the context matters a lot, and whoever it is that you're spending time with could influence the way that you show up. And we all have experienced that, right? We have different so-called personas perhaps in different environments.
Sure.
And that is also a way that we kind of try to survive, right, in certain environments. Yeah, but it comes back to, the sense of self, like, who are you, right?
Adrian has another point he wants to ask. He goes, what about in the work environment? What about those who suck up to their bosses? Are they people pleasers too, or in a kind of an evil way?
Well, they have an agenda, I'm sure.
Right.
And we have to ask, what is that agenda? And a lot of people pleasing is driven by a fear of loss. Fear of loss of the relationship, or fear of loss of something. So if they are currying favor, then what are they scared of? Maybe they're afraid they'll be passed over. They're afraid that people will become get the promotion before them. They're afraid that they'll be ignored, whatever it is, right? And so if it's driven from fear, that's what is at the bottom of that currying favor. Now, whether they're evil or not, I don't know until I encounter them.
But that's the thing. You will never know their intention, right? So how do you deal with that?
I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself, how much is it impacting you? Because we always have to understand that whatever other people do is not 100% within our control. And of course, we'll get frustrated when we see someone currying favor, thinking this person doesn't even have standards, but somehow is being favored by the boss. And you ask yourself, should I do that as well?
Okay.
And that's where that question of authenticity versus attachment has to come in. If I want to stay true to myself, I'm not going to do that. But I also want to get ahead. You know, we sometimes have these so-called and situations. I want to get ahead and I want to be true to myself. Then how do I do that? So again, we have to find situations where maybe we stand out for different reasons from this currying favor person. They choose that approach. You can choose another approach that's true to yourself.
Ooh, let's bring this up when we head back on air, actually now, on 1FM 91.3. Ooh, Dressed for Success. That's Roxette right here on the Brightside. I do believe it's one of your favorite tracks.
I like
Roxette.
my
Look
time,
at her
my
grooving.
time.
Look at our time.
Our time.
So we are on the topic of people pleasing. My goodness, you have really opened my eyes to what it is, that idea of being authentic. I think it's got roots tied in with that whole saying yes and saying yes too much. What other last few points you want to just point out to everyone who want to just do a sort of a self-check on themselves? Are they too much of a people pleaser? Do they need to change that?
I mean, I can give you a little anecdote. So last I had in my previous workplace, I had a supervisor who was quite firm-handed. Let's put it that way, right?
Okay.
And then so about 70% of the workplace or of my colleagues were very, very scared. And they were like, should I go and knock on the door? Even to that point. And then they will, and for me, I was just like, well, this person is a person. And I'm just going to approach her as if she's just a person.
Right.
And so out of the remaining 30% who weren't scared, I was just one of those who just knocked on the door.
Okay.
And just went in and asked, and I always got a pretty good response. And they would come away and say, how do you do that? Then I said, I treated her like as a person, and I tried to ask myself, well, this person wants to get the work done.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I were to just cower behind the door, this person is not going to get the work done, and then it's going to get even more angry. And so I just went ahead and did it. And that's where, for me, I start to think, who am I? If I give in and can't get the stuff done, then I'm also not a responsible team player nor worker in this place. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is it that will give us that confidence to remain authentic to who we are, and also maybe achieve the goals that we want, right? Because we often give in to the fear.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the more we do that, then the more we end up people pleasing, because the fear is dominant. But there's also the other side of fear, which is courage. And sometimes it takes a bit of effort, yes, but going prepared, right? So with this supervisor, I always had all my stuff together. I knew what I was doing, and I would go in with these things with like plan A, plan B, plan C, like maybe all the way to Z, so that if she had counter questions, I would be able to answer it. Yeah, but I'm not looking down on my colleagues or anything at the time, but I think many of them were so frightened.
Of course.
That all they prepared for was that the backlash. But they didn't prepare in terms of the work. Like, how am I going to answer these kind of questions? Because, it was important work, and we were sometimes front-facing with the media and all of that. So,
I like the way that you've approached it. I mean, you kind of treated her as a human being. I mean, him or her, this heavy-handed supervisor, right? And also how you turned something that was potentially negative into something very positive. It spurred you to be really, really thorough with what you do and your work, and it made you a more productive worker as well.
Yeah.
I like that. Really great way for us to wrap up this topic of people pleasing right here on the Bright Side. We do hope you've enjoyed it as well, our Bright Siders, and we hope to catch you real soon, Sha-En. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
1FM 91.3. Good times, greatest hits.